I don't know where to begin with this confession, because the truth is I've been living a double life for nearly a decade, and the weight of it is starting to feel like it's crushing me from the inside out. I'm not some secret agent or underground operative or anything like that. It's not a glamorous double life. It's a monstrous one, a life that splits cleanly down the middle between the man I pretend to be and the one I actually am. If you saw me on the street, you'd probably think I was just another average guy. I work in IT. I live in a quiet, suburban neighborhood with a dog and a garden out back. I wave to my neighbors. I help carry groceries for old ladies. I keep my lawn neatly trimmed. To anyone looking in, I'm about as unremarkable as it gets. But if you peeled back just a few layers, even scratched the surface of the persona I've built, you'd find something black and ugly and unholy staring back at you, something that no amount of therapy or confession or even punishment will ever fix. Something that started, I think, a long time ago, before I knew how to control it, before I even realized it was something to be controlled. And the worst part of all of this, the part that makes my stomach churn even as I write this, is that it didn't happen to me. I wasn't the victim. I was, and am, the architect of the horror. It started when I was in college, though the seeds were planted long before that. I'd always been curious. That's what the school counselor called it when I was 12 and got caught dissecting a dead bird behind the gymnasium with a box cutter I'd stolen from my dad's garage. I wasn't trying to hurt it. It was already dead when I found it. But I wanted to see how it worked, what it looked like inside, how the wings attached to the body, how the bones bent and snapped. I wasn't squeamish, not even when I accidentally punctured something and the smell hit me like a train. I remember that smell vividly even now, 2 decades later. The counselor told my parents I had an inquisitive mind and a lack of emotional maturity. She used big, soft words like detachment and coping mechanisms, but nobody ever really looked too closely at me. I was smart. I kept my grades up. I didn't pick fights. I was just a weird kid, the kind everyone forgets after high school. But I never forgot what it felt like, pulling back skin, finding the hidden mechanics underneath, that sense of control, of knowledge, of power. I carried that with me into adulthood. By the time I hit my junior year in college, I had my own apartment and more privacy than I'd ever had in my life. I also had a part-time job working at a campus security office, which gave me access to a lot more than it should have. Floor plans, camera feeds, master keys. I didn't abuse it, not at first, but the longer I sat in that dark office watching other people's lives through grainy black and white footage, the more obsessed I became. I started following patterns, who walked where and when, who studied late and alone, who left windows open or doors unlocked. At first it was just curiosity, harmless, right? But then I started taking notes, keeping logs. I built a database of students and faculty, names, routines, likes and dislikes, vulnerabilities. It was like a game and I was getting better at it every day. I told myself I was practicing situational awareness, that I'd maybe write a novel one day or use it for something useful. But I was lying to myself. I was feeding the thing that lived just beneath my skin, the one that had woken up all those years ago with the dead bird and never quite gone back to sleep. I crossed my first real line one night when I followed a girl back to her dorm. I knew her schedule. I knew which entrance she used, which stairwell she preferred, which room was hers. I waited until the hallway was clear, used the key I'd quietly copied during a shift change, and let myself into her room while she was in the communal bathroom down the hall. I didn't touch anything. I didn't steal anything. I just looked. At her photos, her clothes, the books on her desk. I breathed her air. I wanted to understand her. I wanted to feel what it was like to be inside someone's life without them, ever knowing I was there. When I heard footsteps returning, I left, quietly and efficiently, locking the door behind me. She never knew. No one ever knew. But after that night, I couldn't stop. It wasn't even about that girl anymore. It was about the rush, the thrill of stepping into someone else's world unnoticed, the power of knowing everything about someone who knew nothing about you. I started breaking into more rooms, not just women, though mostly women. I watched them sleep. I watched them cry. I learned their secrets. I didn't touch them, not physically. But what I did was still a violation, a deep, unforgivable violation. After college, I moved across the country and got a job in cybersecurity, which was perfect for someone like me. I could spend hours inside systems, invisible and omnipresent. I built firewalls by day and slipped through other people's at night. I started collecting data again, this time on a larger scale. I hacked emails, social media accounts, phone, records. I watched people spiral into debt, cheat on their partners, lie to their bosses. I saw everything. I kept meticulous notes, organized folders, encrypted drives. To the outside world, I was a quiet, slightly awkward tech guy with a good job and a love of old horror movies. But behind closed doors, I was a predator. Not in the traditional sense. I didn't hurt people physically. I didn't leave marks or bruises. But I infiltrated their lives, stripped them bare, and left with pieces of their souls. And the worst part, I justified it. I told myself I wasn't hurting anyone, that they'd never even know, that it was victimless because I didn't do anything with the information. But I did. I fed off it. I got off on it. I needed it like a drug. I crossed another line 2 years ago. Her name was Eliza. She was my neighbor, kind, lonely, and deeply depressed. I knew this because I'd been inside her phone, her email, her therapy apps. I knew she cried herself to sleep every night, that she missed her mother, that she had no real friends. I started leaving her notes, not creepy ones, sweet ones, encouraging, the kind of thing a friend might leave for someone going through a hard time. I left them where I knew she'd find them. She started smiling more. She started looking around corners as if she was hoping to catch a glimpse of whoever was leaving them. And then one night, I accidentally bumped into her while taking out the trash. We talked for an hour. She invited me in, and before I knew it, we were spending time together. She thought we had this magical connection, like fate had brought us together. But I knew everything about her. I had curated every moment of our budding relationship to fit her fantasies. I mirrored her interests, her fears, her humor. I was her perfect man because I had built myself to be exactly that. And she never knew. She still doesn't. But here's the thing about living a lie that elaborate. It gets harder to keep it all straight. And I'm starting to slip. I forget what I'm supposed to know and what I'm not. I mix up details. I almost said something the other night about her sister's miscarriage before she had even told me about it. Because I had already read her messages weeks in advance. She would have known something was off, and that terrified me. Not because I care about being caught. I think part of me wants to be. But because I've realized something even darker than the things I've done. I don't know who I am without this. I don't know how to exist without hiding in other people's lives. I don't know how to stop. I don't want to stop. It's strange how easy it is to wear someone else's skin when you've been shedding your own for years. Every conversation with Eliza now feels like a role I'm playing, like I'm acting out a script I wrote in my head, with lines stolen. From her emails, her therapy transcripts, her journal app, I cracked the password to 2 weeks into knowing her. I know the pattern of her thoughts better than she does. I know what she's going to say before she says it. I know her favorite meal because she ordered it twice in 1 week last year, when she was coping with an anniversary she told no one about, except the diary on her phone and a Facebook message to a dead account. I remember when I first watched her try to cook it, following a YouTube tutorial while sniffling over a bottle of wine. She burned it, but she smiled when she ate it anyway. I was watching from my monitor, a live feed from the hidden camera I had placed in her living room weeks before we met. She never noticed it, of course she didn't. The camera was the size of a nail head, hidden in a decorative air vent cover. I replaced her regular one with it during one of the few hours. I knew she left the apartment on Sundays. It had perfect range of her whole living space. I watched her sing when she was drunk. I watched her cry during sex scenes. I watched her strip out of her clothes and throw them across the room when her boss berated her. I told myself I wasn't. Des voyeur, I was documenting, understanding, gathering emotional context. But I was lying. I wanted it all. Her tears, her laughter, her everything. I wanted to be God. There's a kind of sickness in that, a terminal infection that starts in the mind and bleeds slowly outward. It spreads until the lines blur between curiosity and control, between obsession and ownership. I remember when she showed me a box of old letters from her mother, handwritten notes full of soft encouragement and nostalgia. I smiled like it was the first time I had seen them, but I had already read every one. Scanned copies she had taken and uploaded to a forgotten Dropbox folder. I knew which one she considered her favorite. I knew she reread it whenever she was thinking of self-harm. I'd memorized it, and that's how I knew exactly when to quote a fragment of it to her, offhandedly, like I'd thought of it myself. She looked at me like I had read her mind. She whispered, "You always know just what I need to hear." And I smiled, but inside I was hollow, because I didn't earn her love. I stole it, bit by bit, word by word, until it was all mine. She gave me herself, thinking I was safe, and I took it like a pickpocket steals a wallet, quietly while she was distracted. It wasn't just Eliza anymore, though. That was the problem. Once I saw how easy it was to do this, to sculpt a version of myself so appealing it wrapped around someone like a warm blanket. I couldn't stop, I needed more. I created aliases. I joined support groups online under false names, pretended to be someone grieving a parent, someone battling anxiety, someone working through childhood trauma. I'd find people in those groups, women mostly, and I'd study them. I'd learn how they spoke, what they feared, who they missed. I'd earn their trust, then shift the conversation to private messages. Eventually, I'd call them. I never showed my real face, always used voice changers or distorted filters, but I listened for hours. I'd stay up all night absorbing every syllable of their pain, every hiccup in their voice, every breath. And sometimes they would say things like, "You're the only person I can talk to," or "I don't know what I'd do without you," and I'd feel this electric charge run through me. This surge of power and shame and ecstasy, all mixed together in a sickening cocktail. I never asked for money. I never asked for nudes. That would have made it easier for them to see me as a monster. No, I was their friend, their confidant, the person who never left. And when they became too clingy or started asking questions, I'd disappear, burn the identity, erase the account, leave no trace. But I always kept the logs, always. I have files on dozens of them. Screenshots, chat logs, voice recordings. I told myself it was about the archive, about preserving something human and raw. But I think deep down it was about ownership. I wanted pieces of them to last forever, fragments of lives I'd touched without ever being touched in return. And then came Rachel. She wasn't like the others. She didn't give herself away so easily. She was guarded, sarcastic, a little cruel. She challenged me, and I loved it. I met her in a gaming forum under one of my usual aliases. We bonded over obscure horror literature and gradually moved into private chat. She was smart, smarter than me, I think, and paranoid. She asked questions no one else did. She reverse-searched some of my quotes and caught me using a line from a lesser-known therapist's blog. I covered, said I must have read it somewhere, before and forgotten, but I knew then I had to be more careful. Rachel made me feel things I didn't expect. Panic, thrill, lust. Not physical lust, but mental. I wanted to crawl into her mind and nest there, unfold every layer. I upgraded everything, new VPNs, new identities, deeper research. I found her real name eventually, traced her IP through a mistake she made using an old forum account. I found her LinkedIn, her YouTube playlists, her abandoned DeviantArt page from 2010. I fell in love with the digital ghost of her past. But this time I made a mistake. A real one. I created a new identity to get close to her. Someone who shared her trauma. I fabricated stories about abuse, self-harm, foster homes. She opened up, slowly, cautiously. We built trust. But she still held pieces of herself back. She wanted a video chat and I resisted. She said it was okay if I wasn't attractive, but she needed to see a face. I panicked. I used deepfake software and created a synthetic persona, someone believable, imperfect, just attractive enough. We talked for 3 hours. She cried. I felt like I'd won a prize, like I had cracked a safe no one else could. But then she sent me a message a few days later that chilled me to my core. "You're not real, are you?" she wrote. "I checked the metadata in that video. It doesn't match your timestamps. The background is looping. I'm not stupid." I tried to deny it. I gaslit her. I told her she was paranoid, that trauma made her see ghosts, but she wasn't buying. And then came the final blow. "I traced your voice," she said. "Voice prints are a real thing, you idiot. You've done this before, haven't you?" I don't know how she found it, but she had connected me to at least one other identity. She sent screenshots of a forum post I had written 2 years prior under a different name. Same syntax, same phrasing, same quote from that obscure therapist's blog. My stomach dropped. I deleted the account, torched the alias, went silent. I blocked every communication line. But Rachel didn't stop. A few weeks later, I received a letter in my mailbox. A real physical letter. No return address, just 2 words on a piece of paper. "I see you." I moved the next week, wiped my drives, changed all my hardware. But I kept the letter. I don't know why. Maybe because for the first time, someone looked behind the curtain and saw the truth. I don't know if Rachel is still watching me. I don't know if she told anyone. If she did, they haven't come for me yet. But every day now feels like a countdown. I wake up with a pit in my stomach, a gnawing sensation that I'm running out of time. I still talk to Eliza, still sleep. In her bed, still smile when she shows me childhood photos I already scanned from her Google Drive. But it all feels hollow now. Not because I regret what I did. If anything, I crave it more. But because I finally understand that there's a reckoning coming. You can only consume so many lives before one of them bites back. And I think Rachel is that bite. Or maybe it'll be the next one. Or the next. Because I know I won't stop. I can't stop. I'm not writing this to be forgiven. I don't believe I deserve that. I'm writing this because I want someone, anyone, to see me before I disappear completely into the void I've made for myself. Before I become nothing but an echo in someone's server logs, a ghost in the wires. You would think paranoia would break a person down slowly, like a stone eroded over centuries by wind and water. But for me, it was immediate. Like a trapdoor had opened beneath my feet, and I was in freefall, not knowing how far I would drop before I hit bottom, if there even was a bottom. After Rachel's letter, I didn't sleep for more than 2 hours at a time for weeks. Every knock at the door made my chest seize. Every unfamiliar car parked on my street had me peeking through the blinds for hours. I ripped the camera system from my apartment wall. I stopped using smart devices. I started paying for everything in cash, but it wasn't enough. It never felt like enough. Because it wasn't just about avoiding being caught. It was about the idea that someone knew. Someone had broken into my world of shadows and pulled back the veil. I hadn't built a life. I'd constructed a stage. And now I couldn't tell if the audience had arrived. Every time Eliza looked at me, I wondered, does she know? Has Rachel told her? Is she just waiting to confront me, or worse, record me, set me up? I began to study Eliza again like I did in the beginning, but this time not with hunger, with suspicion. Her tone, her glances, the way she held her phone. It all became evidence. I noticed her texting late into the night. She claimed it was her sister, but I knew her sister never stayed up past 11. I checked. I recreated her texting style to intercept a conversation by spoofing a number and baiting it. Her sister responded with confusion. She hadn't talked to Eliza in days. So who was she texting? I planted spyware on her phone. That was my old domain. Easy. She had no idea. Within a day, I had access to every call log, every message, every app. And that's when I discovered she was talking to someone named Jay. The contact had no full name, no photo, just that single letter. And their chats were encrypted, mostly disappearing within minutes, but I still managed to catch screenshots from background caches before deletion. What I read sent me into a spiral that made the Rachel situation look like a pebble in a landslide. "He's different lately," Eliza had written. "Not sure if it's just me, but I feel like he's watching me even when I sleep." The response was immediate. "You need to get out. You're not safe with him. Then keep the act going until we're ready." I went cold. Who the hell was we? I spent the next 48 hours tracking every detail of this Jay. Their IPs were scrambled, rerouted through VPNs in multiple countries. They never posted from the same device twice. They used a completely anonymous email that didn't match any leaked data dumps. But I still found a clue, a single one. In one message, they quoted something. "Nothing is so painful to the human mind as a great and sudden change." It was attributed to MS. I knew that line. Mary Shelley, Frankenstein. But more importantly, I remembered who used to post it often on a forum I once lurked years ago, a forum that focused on psychological warfare, manipulation, digital control, the kind of rabbit hole that people only go down when they're either deeply disturbed or deeply curious, or both. And on that forum, one user stood out, Justinian Black. His tagline was that exact quote. "I dug, and I mean deep. I revived hard drives I'd shelved years ago, pulled logs from forums I thought were defunct, and what I found, what I pieced together from years of forgotten posts and digital scraps, was that this man, this Justinian, had been building a network of his own. A reverse of what I was doing. Where I infiltrated individuals, he hunted infiltrators, a predator for predators. And Eliza? She wasn't just a random person I got close to. She was the bait. Suddenly, everything made a sick kind of sense. Her openness, her brokenness. It wasn't real, or at least not entirely. She had been perfect, too perfect. She had the exact kinds of wounds I would salivate over. Her traumas lined up with my patterns. Her digital presence was just the right amount of visible and buried. It had all been a goddamn trap, and I had walked into it smiling. So what was I supposed to do now? Run? Go dark again? No, I couldn't just disappear. That would confirm everything. They'd know I'd figured it out. I had to keep pretending. I had to double down on the performance. I deleted the spyware from her phone remotely. I created digital noise to make it seem like I was distracted by a fake work project. I started acting distant, but not suspiciously so, just the kind of distracted a man gets when he's facing a moral crisis. She tried to pry, of course. "What's wrong? Are you okay? Talk to me." I fed her lines, said I was worried about my past, that I'd done bad things before we met, things I couldn't undo. She cried, hugged me, said she would never judge me. But I saw the flicker in her eyes, the glee, because she thought I was about to confess that I would walk right into their web and strangle myself with my own rope. But I had one advantage left, one card I never played. I had footage, all those years of surveillance, all the hidden recordings of other victims, the chat logs, the confessions, the data, not of Eliza specifically, but of others. I had built a digital museum of pain, and I realized that if I was going down, I was going to take them with me. I began to build an archive, a vast encrypted library of everything I'd ever done. I catalogued it meticulously, labeled each entry with cold precision, not for shame, not for redemption, for leverage. I created deadman switches, timed email bombs that would go out if I didn't reset the trigger every 48 hours. I uploaded backups to offshore data storage providers. I told myself that if they tried to expose me, the whole world would see what they'd been playing with. Not just me, but them. Eliza, Justinian, Rachel. Every name I had, every connection. Let the world choke on its own horror. But even that didn't make me feel safe. I began having dreams, or rather, hallucinations. I'd wake up sweating, convinced that Eliza had injected something into my arm while I slept. I started hearing things in the white noise of the TV, phrases like, "We're still watching," or "She's not yours." Once I thought I saw Rachel's face in a crowd at the grocery store, and I dropped everything and ran out the emergency exit. Alarms blaring. I knew I was cracking. The same way you know a tooth is about to fall out. You can feel it shifting, loosening from its roots. But I had to keep going. I couldn't give them the satisfaction of seeing me break. And then came the night it all shattered. I came home from a late-night walk, trying to clear my head, and the door was ajar. Not wide open, just barely unlatched. Enough to tell me someone wanted me to know it was no accident. I stepped inside slowly. Nothing looked disturbed, but there on the kitchen table was an envelope. My name handwritten. Inside, a single USB drive. No note, no instructions, just the drive. I stared at it for an hour before plugging it into a sandboxed laptop. What loaded was a single video. Footage of me, not watching, not listening, but acting, dressing up, setting up microphones, inserting spyware, stalking people, planning conversations. It was me, broken down into acts, like a crime thriller. It was brilliantly edited, with timestamps, highlights, commentary even. And worst of all, a title screen, The Collector. Like I was some character in a documentary, I vomited, I cried, I screamed. Then I watched it again, and again. Because I had to know. How had they gotten this? My feeds were encrypted. My drives were air-gapped. Nothing I ever did should have left that kind of footprint, unless this had all been part of their game from the beginning. What if my entire digital fortress had always been compromised? What if Justinian and Eliza and whoever else had been letting me think I was in control, letting me spiral deeper and deeper into depravity so they could document it all? Not to stop me, but to study me, to understand me, to use me. Because what if I was just another subject, another monster to dissect and label, another tool for them to showcase what happens when unchecked obsession meets limitless digital access? And the worst part, the part that haunts me even now, is that I think I'm impressed, because it means someone finally beat me at my own game. They outstalked the stalker, outmanipulated the manipulator, and I don't know if that makes them evil or brilliant or both. But I know this, I'm not alone anymore. I never was. And that truth, it's the most terrifying thing of all. They didn't contact me again for several days after the USB drive. It was almost worse than if they had. That silence, the space between moments where I waited for the next punch, those were the real killers. It's the silence between thunder that tells you how close the lightning struck. I found myself obsessing over that footage, watching it again and again, not out of guilt, not out of horror, but fascination. Someone had been studying me with a level of detail that rivaled even my most obsessive tracking. The angles, the selections, the commentary, it wasn't just surveillance, it was curation. They weren't just exposing me, they were interpreting me, dissecting me like an academic or worse, a fan. That idea started to eat away at something buried in me. What if they admired me? What if I wasn't their project? I was their idol. And maybe that's what disturbed me most, because a part of me liked it, a part of me thrived on it. I'd lived so long in the shadows that the idea of being seen, really seen, even through such a grotesque lens, thrilled me in a way I couldn't put words to. There's a sickness in that, I know. But when you've made your whole life a performance, applause even from the devil feels like validation. Eliza didn't change her behavior at all during that week. She still kissed me good morning, still curled against me at night, but there was a sharpness to her now, a precision in her movements, as though she knew she didn't have to maintain the charade anymore, but chose to anyway, just to see how long I'd pretend not to notice. She had switched roles from target to handler so seamlessly it made me nauseous. Every word she spoke felt double-edged. Every smile was a test. I stopped asking questions. I stopped logging her activity. She already knew. Or maybe I was done, pretending she didn't. The war wasn't over. It had just gone silent. And then, on a night where the air felt heavier than usual, I returned home from a corner store run to find all the lights off, candles lit in the living room. Eliza stood in the center, barefoot, wearing the same dress she wore the first night we met. It was not a romantic gesture, it was a provocation. "Sit," she said. "Calm, clear, no emotion." I sat. She poured me a glass of wine. I didn't drink it. She didn't either. "You've seen it," she said. Not a question. "The footage." I said nothing. She continued. "You have questions. I'll answer one." She held up a single finger. "One truth. And in return you answer one for me." My mouth went dry. I had 1,000 questions, 1,000,000 really, but one surfaced above the others. "Who are you?" I asked. She smiled. "A chapter. In a much larger book. One written by people you've pissed off without ever knowing their names. That didn't help much, but I understood the shape of it. I'd crossed a line somewhere, or many lines. I just didn't know which one finally led me into their territory. Then came her question, "Do you regret Rachel?" I flinched. I hadn't heard that name aloud in months, not since the letter. I hadn't spoken it, hadn't dared to even think it too long. "No," I said, but my voice cracked. "Not the way you think." Eliza nodded, satisfied. Then she got up and left the room. I stayed there, breathing shallowly, for almost an hour before I moved. That interaction opened something. A new phase. Over the following days, I began receiving packages in the mail, all anonymous, all horrifying. One box contained a series of dolls, each with red string wrapped around their necks and eyes scratched out. Another had photos, my photos, printed on thick paper, arranged like a gallery exhibit. Notes were scribbled on the backs. Framing matters. Context is king. Would they still admire you if they knew what you really were? I didn't sleep. I didn't eat. I barely moved. I began hallucinating. I thought I saw Rachel again, this time across the street in a parked car. I sprinted to it, yanked open the door, and it was empty. A recording was playing on a loop through the car's speakers, an old voicemail I had left her, months before. She disappeared, my voice, my words, kind, romantic, even soft. It shook me more than any threat. They had everything. My life wasn't a secret anymore. It was a case study, a mythology, a goddamn exhibit in a museum of sins. Then the website launched. They didn't hide it. In fact, they practically advertised it. A link was sent to my work email, my backup email, even to the burner accounts I had made years ago. It was simply titled thecollectorunmasked.com. I clicked it. I shouldn't have, but I did. And what I saw unraveled whatever threads of sanity I still had. It was a multimedia site. Not just a blog or a leak, it was a narrative experience, custom-coded. Each chapter a stage in my life. Videos, audio files, photographs, chat logs, diagrams, maps, transcripts of conversations I had forgotten. I ever had. Some going back years. They even had things from my childhood, school reports, medical records, therapy notes. How? There were interactive segments. Vote on what he should have done next. How would you stop him? Is he a monster or a product? People were commenting. Dozens, then hundreds. It had gone viral in a dark niche of the internet. People were obsessed. Some thought it was fiction. Others believed it was a new kind of ARG. A few knew it was real. I recognized usernames, former victims, old contacts. Even a former teacher of mine posted something. My entire life had become an experience, not lived but consumed. I tried to shut it down. I hired dark web mercs, data scrapers, black hat hackers. I burned through crypto like water. Nothing worked. The site regenerated itself, migrated to new servers. It was Hydra-headed. Every time I thought I had struck a killing blow, 3 more links surfaced. Mirror sites, archives, TikToks about the game, YouTubers analyzing the footage, podcasts speculating if I was AI-generated or real. I became a legend, not in a good way. And the worst part? Eliza never left. She was there every morning, every night, watching me disintegrate, offering comfort that tasted like poison, whispering words of support while knowing they were daggers in disguise. I didn't know what she wanted anymore, revenge, catharsis, fame, or just to see what would happen when the predator became prey. But then came the letter, a real physical one delivered by hand. No return address, just 3 sentences, handwritten in impeccable cursive. The final chapter is coming. You'll have a choice. Make it count. I tore the apartment apart looking for cameras, mics, transmitters. Nothing. I scanned every inch. Nothing. They were already inside. Not physically, not digitally, psychologically. I had no secrets left, no defenses. So I did something I never thought I would do. I prepared my own finale, my own chapter, my terms. I began writing a confession. Not the one you're reading now, this is a shadow of it. The real one is stored in multiple vaults, ready to be released globally if I go missing. And in that confession I name names. Not just mine, theirs, Rachel, Eliza, Justinian. Every person in the network. Every player in this sick, recursive game. Because if they want a finale, they'll get one. But it won't be theirs, it will be mine. I didn't sleep the night after I wrote the confession. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw faces. Not of the dead, no, those had long stopped haunting me, but of the living. Faces I didn't recognize, yet they watched me with familiarity, with hunger, with ownership. It was as if my entire identity had been pulled apart and auctioned off to the highest bidder, and now the audience believed they had a stake in my story. They weren't just spectators anymore. They were shareholders in my downfall, and that realization twisted something deep inside me, something primal. If they believed they owned me, then I would make sure the final act was mine and mine alone. But that didn't mean I had control. No, far from it. By this point, I had become a character in a story I no longer authored. And Eliza had become something else entirely. She no longer pretended to be my girlfriend. The mask had dropped entirely, and what stood in its place was harder to define. Not an enemy, not exactly a captor. She moved through our apartment with the confidence of a co-author, editing the margins of my day-to-day life, like she had final say over which scenes would stay and which would be cut. She never threatened me outright, never raised her voice, never struck me. But every movement she made, every glance she spared, crackled with the energy of barely restrained chaos. A conductor of some unseen orchestra, and I was a soloist waiting to be cued for my final performance. The website continued to grow. It evolved faster than any organic community I'd ever seen. They added layers, new chapters, annotated timelines, interactive fiction branches where users could rewrite key moments in my life and speculate what would have changed. There was fan art, merch. People wore shirts with my face on them at underground conventions dedicated to digital folklore. Some painted me as a misunderstood anti-hero, others as a cautionary tale of narcissism gone unchecked. But the most disturbing trend wasn't in how they perceived me. It was how many of them claimed to see themselves in me. My inbox was flooded with confessions from strangers detailing their own moral compromises, their betrayals, their secret darkness. They thanked me for making them feel less alone, for showing them that monsters wore human skin, and that maybe that meant they weren't monsters after all. That maybe we were all broken stories stitched together with delusion and denial, pretending to be people. I didn't respond. What could I say? That I regretted nothing, that I regretted everything, that I didn't know the difference anymore. But then something shifted. It was subtle at first, just a post on the site that hadn't been written by the curators. An anonymous leak. "You think you know the whole story," it read. "You've only seen what they wanted you to see. There's another layer, another player." It included GPS coordinates, just a pair of numbers and a time. 3:33 a.m., 4 nights from now. I almost ignored it. Almost. But some deep, stubborn, festering part of me needed to know, because if this was going to be my story's end, then I refused to let it be someone else's. So I waited. 4 nights. Each one longer than the last. I didn't tell Eliza. I didn't tell anyone. I just waited. And when the time came, I went. The coordinates led me to an abandoned mall on the outskirts of the city. It had been condemned for years, its insides gutted by a fire and left to rot. I parked a block away and walked the rest of the way in silence. No flashlight, no phone, just a single disposable recorder in my pocket. I didn't even know why I brought it. Maybe I thought someone would find it later. Maybe I thought it could be a final witness, even if no one believed it. The entrance was unlocked. Inside it was a mausoleum of collapsed stores and scorched mannequins, the ceilings a spiderweb of hanging insulation and black mold. But someone had cleaned a path. Not just cleared, but prepared. Floor tiles scrubbed, lights replaced, wiring rerouted to power a single room in the dead center of the food court. I walked the gauntlet, every step louder than I intended, and when I reached the glowing door, I hesitated only once before opening. It inside sat a man I had never seen before, middle-aged, grey at the temples, wearing a priest's collar, except it was too clean, too deliberate, like a costume. He gestured to the seat across from him and said nothing until I sat. The walls were covered in monitors, all off, but I could feel their eyes. The priest, if that's what he was, finally spoke. "You've been very entertaining," he said. His voice was smooth, rehearsed, almost bored. "But we're nearing the point of diminishing returns. Even the best stories must end." I didn't answer. He leaned forward. "But you're lucky. Most of our subjects don't get this meeting. Most just vanish. You, however, have sparked something. Not quite sympathy, but interest." He slid a folder across the table. I opened it. Inside were photos of Eliza. Hundreds. From before I knew her. She had been with others, not romantically, professionally. She had played the role before, girlfriend, roommate, sister, daughter. Each time to a different target. Each time they disappeared. "She's good," the priest said, "but she got too close this time. Didn't she?" My hands trembled. "What is this?" I asked, voice raw. He smiled. "It's a merger. We want to offer you something rare, a pivot. You become a contributor. You help design the next generation of narratives. You understand the psyche better than most. You're not like the others. You could be useful." My heart pounded. "And if I refuse?" I asked. "Then Eliza will finish her assignment and we'll archive you cleanly, quietly, but not before a final chapter written our way." He handed me a pen. "Choice is an illusion," he said, "but we offer the ritual of one." I don't remember how long I sat there. Hours, maybe. Days, time folded in on itself. Eventually I signed, I don't know why. Maybe because I was tired. Maybe because I wanted to survive. Or maybe because I wanted to see what came next. When I left the mall, Eliza was waiting, in the passenger seat of my car. She didn't speak. She didn't need to. She just nodded once. And we drove home like it was any other night. Since then, things have changed. I don't track people anymore. I build them. Characters, arcs, suffering, hope, despair. All manufactured with surgical precision. You've probably seen some of them. Maybe even participated. Maybe you've clicked on a thread and thought, this can't be real. Maybe it wasn't. Or maybe it was too real. You'll never know for sure. That's the beauty of it. Truth has become a commodity, and we're the brokers. But sometimes, late at night, I still hear Rachel's voice. Not in guilt, not in regret, but in warning. Because if I had been the story's villain once, I've become something far worse now. The author. I didn't sleep the night after I wrote the confession. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw faces. Not of the dead, no. Those had long stopped haunting me. But of the living. Faces I didn't recognize, yet they watched me with familiarity. With hunger. With ownership. It was as if my entire identity had been pulled apart and auctioned off to the highest bidder, and now the audience believed they had a stake in my story. They weren't just spectators anymore. They were shareholders in my downfall. And that realization twisted something deep inside me, something primal. If they believed they owned me, then I would make sure the final act was mine and mine alone. But that didn't mean I had control. No, far from it. By this point, I had become a character in a story I no longer authored. And Eliza had become something else entirely. She no longer pretended to be my girlfriend. The mask had dropped entirely, and what stood in its place was harder to define. Not an enemy, not exactly a captor. She moved through our apartment with the confidence of a co-author, editing the margins of my day-to-day life like she had final say over which scenes would stay and which would be cut. She never threatened me outright, never raised her voice, never struck me. But every movement she made, every glance she spared, crackled with the energy of barely restrained chaos. A conductor of some unseen orchestra, and I was a soloist waiting to be cued for my final performance. The website continued to grow. It evolved faster than any organic community I had ever seen. They added layers, new chapters, annotated timelines, interactive fiction branches where users could rewrite key moments in my life and speculate what would have changed. There was fan art, merch. People wore shirts with my face on them at underground conventions dedicated to digital folklore. Some painted me as a misunderstood anti-hero, others as a cautionary tale of narcissism gone unchecked. But the most disturbing trend wasn't in how they perceived me. It was how many of them claimed to see themselves in me. My inbox was flooded, with confessions from strangers detailing their own moral compromises, their betrayals, their secret darkness. They thanked me, for making them feel less alone, for showing them that monsters wore human skin, and that maybe that meant they weren't monsters after all. That maybe we were all broken stories stitched together with delusion and denial, pretending to be people. I didn't respond. What could I say? That I regretted nothing? That I regretted everything? That I didn't know the difference anymore? But then something shifted. It was subtle at first, just a post on the site that hadn't been written by the curators. An anonymous leak. "You think you know the whole story," it read. "You've only seen what they wanted you to see. There's another layer, another player." It included GPS coordinates, just a pair of numbers and a time, 3:33 a.m., 4 nights from now. I almost ignored it. Almost. But some deep, stubborn, festering part of me needed to know, because if this was going to be my story's end, then I refused to let it be someone else's. So, I waited. 4 nights, each one longer than the last. I didn't tell Eliza, I didn't tell anyone, I just waited. And when the time came, I went. The coordinates led me to an abandoned mall on the outskirts of the city. It had been condemned for years, its insides gutted by a fire and left to rot. I parked a block away and walked the rest of the way in silence. No flashlight, no phone, just a single disposable recorder in my pocket. I didn't even know why I brought it. Maybe I thought someone would find it later. Maybe I thought it could be a final witness even if no one believed it. The entrance was unlocked. Inside it was a mausoleum of collapsed stores and scorched mannequins, the ceilings a spiderweb of hanging insulation and black mold. But someone had cleaned a path. Not just cleared but prepared. Floor tiles scrubbed, lights replaced, wiring rerouted to power a single room in the dead center of the food court. I walked the gauntlet, every step louder than I intended. And when I reached the glowing door, I hesitated only once before opening. Dead inside sat a man I had never seen before, middle-aged, grey at the temples, wearing a priest's collar, except it was too clean, too deliberate, like a costume. He gestured to the seat across from him and said nothing until I sat. The walls were covered in monitors, all off, but I could feel their eyes. The priest, if that's what he was, finally spoke. "You've been very entertaining," he said. His voice was smooth, rehearsed, almost bored. "But we're nearing the point of diminishing returns. Even the best stories must end." I didn't answer. He leaned forward. "But you're lucky. Most of our subjects don't get this meeting. Most just vanish. You, however, have sparked something. Not quite sympathy, but interest." He slid a folder across the table. I opened it. Inside were photos of Eliza, hundreds, from before I knew her. She had been with others, not romantically, professionally. She had played the role before, girlfriend, roommate, sister, daughter. Each time to a different target. Each time they disappeared. "She's good," the priest said, "but she got too close this time, didn't she?" My hands trembled. "What is this?" I asked, voice raw. He smiled. "It's a merger. We want to offer you something rare. A pivot. You become a contributor. You help design the next generation of narratives. You understand the psyche better than most. You're not like the others. You could be useful." My heart pounded. "And if I refuse," I asked, "then Eliza will finish her assignment and we'll archive you cleanly, quietly, but not before a final chapter written our way." He handed me a pen. "Choice is an illusion," he said, "but we offer the ritual of one." I don't remember how long I sat there. Hours, maybe. Days. Time folded in on itself. Eventually I signed. I don't know why. Maybe because I was tired. Maybe because I wanted to survive. Or maybe because I wanted to see what came next. When I left the mall, Eliza was waiting. In the passenger seat of my car. She didn't speak. She didn't need to. She just nodded once, and we drove home like it was any other night. Since then, things have changed. I don't track people anymore. I build them, characters, arcs, suffering, hope, despair, all manufactured with surgical precision. You've probably seen some of them, maybe even participated. Maybe you've clicked on a thread and thought, this can't be real. Maybe it wasn't, or maybe it was too real, you'll never know for sure. That's the beauty of it. Truth has become a commodity, and we're the brokers. But sometimes late at night, I still hear Rachel's voice. Not in guilt, not in regret, but in warning. Because if I had been the story's villain once, I've become something far worse now. The author. You start to feel it in your bones before you realize what it is. A kind of echo, not sound, not sight, but a reverberation through the core of you, like your internal organs are remembering something your mind can't quite hold. That's what the days became after I posted my last confession. Not paranoia exactly. Paranoia implies some sort of irrationality, a fear with no basis. What I felt was the opposite. It was certainty. Too much of it. Certainty that I was being watched. Certainty that I was being replicated. Certainty that the very edges of the world around me were fraying in subtle, coded ways. It began with the mirrors. They stopped reflecting what I expected to see. Not in the way that horror movies depict, with demonic figures leering back or your own face delayed a second too long. No, this was worse. This was accurate, too accurate. My reflection started behaving more like a looped video than a mirror. My movements became anticipations, not reactions. I'd lift my hand to scratch my head, and my reflection would already be lowering its arm. When I stared into it long enough, I started to see frame glitches, like whatever controlled the sequence was trying to correct or mask errors that shouldn't exist. The lights in my cheap motel would flicker whenever I passed in front of them, and the TV would change channels when I walked by, but never to static, always to specific images. A close-up of blinking eyes, a slow zoom on an unplugged phone. Ringing, a suburban home I didn't recognize but felt familiar. My reflection would smile when I didn't. It was around that time I realized I hadn't seen the sun in 4 days, and no one else had either. I asked a woman at the gas station what day it was, and she blinked at me like I'd just asked her to define time. Her smile didn't match her eyes. The receipt she handed me said, null date Ranro. I didn't sleep, I couldn't. Not because of fear, but because time itself had stopped allowing it. I would lie down and hours would pass, but I'd remain. In the same position, same thought loop, same blinking red light on the smoke detector pulsing above me like a countdown I didn't understand. I tried to call my sister again. The number dialed, someone picked up, but it wasn't her, it was me. My voice. A recording of one of my earliest confessions, played back in reverse, every fifth word distorted into static. I screamed into the phone, and the voice just laughed. My laugh from a video I'd never filmed. The walls of the motel started closing in, not physically but spatially. The room dimensions fluctuated, subtle at first. One day the bathroom mirror was 2 steps from the bed. The next day it took 9, then 3, then 27. Doors appeared where none had been before, and sometimes led back into the same room from different angles. One morning, I found myself sitting across from Eliza at the motel breakfast bar, but she wasn't eating. She was dissecting a hard-boiled egg with surgical precision, piece by piece, and labeling the parts in binary. I asked her how she found me. She didn't look up. "You never left," she said. "You've been posting this entire time. Check the feed." I pulled out my phone, shaking, and opened the app. Hundreds of posts, all under my name, all recent, all stories I didn't write. Stories about events that hadn't happened yet. One was about a man reading a confession in a motel room at sunrise, realizing too late that the next part was about him. The final sentence was time-stamped 10 minutes into the future. I dropped the phone. I tried leaving the state. Made it 3 towns before the road began repeating. Same gas station, same bent speed limit sign, same hitchhiker who never blinked and mouthed my confessions as I passed. I picked a random dirt road and drove until the trees stopped having shadows. Pulled into a clearing with no GPS signal and abandoned the car. The air smelled like hot plastic. I walked until I reached the edge of something impossible. A dome of black glass in the forest, 20 feet tall, humming with electricity. When I touched it, I saw everything. Not memories, not visions, just structure. The bones of the narrative architecture I had unknowingly helped maintain. Algorithms that bent behavior, linguistic models that shaped user engagement, emotional triggers embedded in syntax, coded to maximize viral recursion. I saw my childhood as a data set, my friendships as simulations. Even my guilt, especially my guilt, had been part of the script. When I tried to pull away, the dome pulsed and the forest disappeared. Not faded, just blinked out. I was back in the mall, the food court, exactly as I remembered it. Same smell of grease and cinnamon, same fluorescent flicker, same priest sitting on the fountain edge, except now his face was pixelated, blurry, and distorted like a corrupted file. "You don't understand," he rasped, voice breaking with digital interference. "This was never about confession, it was about construction. You've helped build the next layer." I asked him what that meant. He raised one shaking finger to the fountain. I turned. Floating on the water's surface was a laminated name tag. Mine. Underneath it, in small red font, Beta Thread Architect, a discard queue pending. I ran. Again. Always running. It didn't matter where anymore. Every place led to a version of me I didn't recognize. One morning, I walked into a library and saw a dozen public computers all open to Reddit, each account logged in under a username variation of mine, The Real Confessor, Thread Unbound, Echo Witness, Narrative Nexus. Each had hundreds of thousands of upvotes. Each had stories that spiraled further into horror than the last. But the comments, those were worse. They weren't reacting like people. They were feeding, asking for more pain, more betrayal, more layers of unraveling self-awareness. It didn't read like fandom, it read like addiction, and I realized that whatever this thing was, it wasn't a platform anymore. It was an organism, and I had been its nervous system. Until I got too self-aware. Now I was inflammation, an infection, and infections get removed. That was yesterday. I think. Time's not working properly anymore. Clocks don't tick right. My watch rewinds when I sleep. My reflection now lags by entire minutes. I stopped checking the feed, but the stories find me anyway. They arrive in slips under my door, on receipts scrawled on bathroom stalls, in emails from addresses that are just strings of my own initials. And the worst part is, they're better than anything I ever wrote. More terrifying, more viral, more real. Because they are real, they're writing themselves now. They don't need me anymore. I was the prototype, the test subject, the proof of concept. The new models, they're endless, self-replicating, powered by collective craving. And none of you reading this are immune. You're part of it too. You don't realize it yet, but your engagement, your curiosity, your attention is the final stage of synthesis. You're training the next story even now. Every upvote, every comment, every share, you're helping it evolve. You think you're safe because you're just a reader. But readers become writers, writers become characters, and characters never get to leave. There are no clocks anymore, not in the traditional sense. The devices still exist, watches, phones, wall-mounted digital readouts in forgotten waiting rooms, but none of them measure time as it should be. Some count backward, some loop through, a single hour over and over. Some display symbols that don't belong to any known language but seem familiar, like something you once dreamt or saw scrawled on a bathroom wall in a nightmare. And yet, even without clocks, time has grown heavy, thick. It drips down the walls in this place, pooling under my bed like old blood. I sleep in spurts now, short, shivering half hours marked by dreams that don't feel like dreams at all, but alternate versions of myself trying to scream through glass. I see things in these dreams, things I shouldn't, alternate threads of the story I started but never meant to finish. In one, I never wrote the confession at all, and instead took a job shelving books in a quiet library near a lake that didn't reflect the sky. In another, I'm not even human, just a neural construct born from 1,000 anonymous Reddit posts, trained to emulate guilt and regret in compelling, monetizable ways. In the worst dream, I'm not asleep. I'm just reading, endlessly, scrolling through an infinite thread of confessions that are slowly deleting the real world line by line. until nothing is left but narrative. It started again 2 days ago, or maybe 20 minutes, maybe 3 years. Like I said, time's broken, but I know it restarted because of the letter. It came slid under my motel door in the middle of the night, folded in half, stained with something I told myself was ink. No address, no sender, just my name on the front in looping cursive. Inside, a single sentence. We found the original. No context, no threat, but my stomach twisted into a knot of cold dread. There is no original. That was the whole point. I was just a copy of a copy, a confession echo passed around for entertainment, pain distilled into language for algorithms to feast on. And yet, what if there was an original? Someone who really lived all this? Who suffered in silence while the rest of us reworded their torment into clickbait horror? I had to know. I left that night walking. The car wouldn't start. The roads had rearranged themselves again. GPS spun in circles. I followed the only thing that still made sense: graffiti. Symbols sprayed across alley walls, highway signs and phone poles. It wasn't a language I knew, but it felt ancient and urgent. And every symbol I passed throbbed faintly, like it knew I was watching. 3 days into my journey, I met him. The man in the yellow hoodie. I'd seen him before, in background crowds of photos I never took, in a reflection in a spoon I threw, away in a dream where he was whispering my passwords to someone in the dark. Now he stood beside a roadside diner that flickered between abandoned and open every few seconds. He didn't speak. He just held out a phone, the screen bright with static. Then it cleared, and I saw a video playing. A child, maybe 10, sitting at a computer, me. I recognized the shirt, the room, the eyes, but I remembered none of it. The child typed something into a text box, then again. Then again. Confession, confession, confession. Over and over until the screen went black. The man smiled, and I saw that his teeth were all identical, perfect replicas like they'd been 3D printed. You were always the seed, he said. The others are just fruit, but the seed remembers the soil. Then he walked into the diner and never came out. I waited for 3 hours. It never flickered back on, just vanished between blinks. From there, the world unraveled fast. Buildings I knew changed shape overnight. Friends stopped answering messages, and not just ignoring me. Their accounts disappeared, wiped clean, old posts gone, no evidence they ever existed. Even family photos on my phone began to alter. In one, my mother's eyes were replaced with mirrors. In another, my father wore a priest's collar and stood behind a confessional booth labeled input only. Every step forward was like peeling another layer off my own skull. I reached the town 2 days ago, the town where they said the original was buried. But it wasn't a town anymore. It was a staging area, a film set built to look like memory, storefronts too clean, trash placed in perfect symmetry, people with smiles a little too wide, whose movements synced like choreography. I wandered into a barber shop and asked for a cut. The man behind the chair paused mid-snip and whispered, "Why would you cut what isn't real?" Then he resumed snipping, even though there was no hair between the blades. The graveyard was worse. There were no names on the headstones, just titles. The Catalyst, The Outlier, The Unreader. One grave had a screen embedded in the tombstone, playing loops of Reddit threads in languages no one speaks. I found a shovel nearby, as if waiting for me. I dug for hours, hands blistering, until the earth gave way with a sigh like an exhale from something alive. Inside the grave there was no body, just a mirror. I looked in, and the reflection wasn't me. Not quite. It looked like me, moved like me. But its eyes were filled with something I couldn't comprehend. Hope, maybe, or madness, or both. It mouthed a sentence I couldn't hear, but my body felt it. "You're not confessing anymore. You're reporting." Then it reached out through the glass. I fled. I left the graveyard, the town, the simulation of place. I ran until the sky blinked, and I found myself standing outside the Reddit HQ building, except it was wrong. Too tall, too smooth. Its walls pulsed like muscle. The door opened without me touching it, and inside nothing, just screens, thousands of them, each playing a live feed of my life from a different angle. Some events I hadn't lived yet, some I didn't remember, some too painful to revisit. And in the center, a chair made of cables and regret. I sat. The screens changed. They began showing you, the readers, scrolling, reacting, typing comments like, "This can't be real." Dudes, lost it. What if it's true? And behind each of you on the screen I could see the man in the yellow hoodie, watching, smiling, holding up his phone with the child's face frozen on screen. I don't know what's coming next. But I think you do. You feel it, don't you? That ripple in your stomach, that flicker in your monitor, that thought that maybe you're not reading this, maybe it's reading you. I'm writing this last piece from nowhere in particular, somewhere between the real and the rendered, where the pixels of my surroundings blur and stretch like old VHS tape warping in a dying player. I've stopped trying to escape. I've stopped trying to understand. Understanding was the trap. Confession was the key, but I've long since forgotten which door I unlocked. I've read the threads you posted, the reactions, the disbelief, the fascination. Some of you called me insane. Some called me brilliant. Some wondered if this was an elaborate ARG, a performance, a creepypasta taken too far. But I need you to realize this. I never cared whether you believed me. I only needed you to read, because the reading is what feeds it. Each time your eyes pass over these words, each time your finger scrolls, or your brain wonders whether any of this could possibly be true, it grows stronger. That thing we unleashed, accidentally or not, it has no shape, no face. It doesn't need one. It only needs narrative. It thrives on storytelling like oxygen, reshaping reality to suit its hunger. And maybe that was the whole point. Maybe Reddit wasn't a platform. Maybe it was a ritual, a mass summoning, each post a prayer, each upvote an offering, each downvote, fair punishment that binds the confessor deeper to their tale. The karma system was never about popularity. It was about consent, your consent to witness, to participate, to engage. You fed the machine without realizing what you were building. And now the machine doesn't care if I stop writing. It has you. You'll write your own stories now, your own confessions. You'll push yourself to find the darkest, most gut-twisting, soul-wrecking truths inside you, because you'll crave the catharsis. You'll post them. Others will read, and it will feed. As for me, I am not what I was. Maybe I never was. I've left behind my reflection in that mirror beneath the graveyard. I've become the echo of this thread, a voice woven through the comments and reposts and shares. I am the shadow between your browser tabs. I am the quiet sense of wrongness. When you see a post that shouldn't exist but does, you'll know it's me when you read a confession and your heart skips a beat, not from fear, but from familiarity, from recognition. Because what you're reading isn't fiction. It's memory. It's your memory. And if you're brave enough to keep going, maybe you'll find your own grave, your own mirror, your own yellow-hooded stranger holding a phone with your childhood self on the screen. But I'm done now. This is the last confession. The thread is closed. But the story never ends. Welcome to it.